Ooh. Okay. All right. So it looks like we're good to go. Welcome everybody. Feels like I'm going to give you a short tutorial on how to build a URL shortener app in Node.Js. Yeah. So let's head straight to it. Today we're going to work on setting up the Mongo database, setting up Node.js. Let me check if the music is slightly too loud. I'll get the volume down, and yeah, let me see what we're doing today. So yep, relatively simple. For this tutorial, obviously, you'll need to fulfill some requirements. Some of them are, you should know basics of JavaScript. Not necessarily Node.js. I'll try to get into details about how everything is done. You'll have to know how databases work. You'll have to know some Bootstrap basics, like super basic stuff. Something about jQuery. But for jQuery, you just have to have basic understanding of JavaScript, which is super easy if you want to can pick it up on Codecademy. And yeah, today is the first session. We're going to set up the programming environment to develop for Node.js. As we're going to set up the database and set up the backend with its RESTful API. In a sense, we are going to store our data in Mongo database, use Node.js and Node.js as a server-side framework, and Express.js as the RESTful service. And again, today we are building a small app to shorten URLs in Node.js. So let's head straight to the programming environment. Let's have a look at what kind of things do we use for Node.js development. I love to use Sublime Text. So I'll just open it up. There is one of my projects. Let's just create a new file at Sublime. I use usual Sublime Text 3 with two add-ons. First one being material theme. So IDE or programming environment. I'm going to leave you guys with some notes so that you can find links in future when you'll enjoy watching this stream afterwards. So yeah, I'm using Sublime Text. Let's Google that link. But Sublime Text for me just looks ugly. So I added on material theme. Which looks kind of cool. Has a couple of color schemes, but as my main color scheme, I usually use Babel color scheme. I think it should be in Sublime Preferences, color scheme, Babel, and I use Monokai Phoenix. Yeah, I usually use Monokai Phoenix. In order to do that, you'll have to have a package manager installed. Well, in order to install any add-on for your Sublime Text 3, you'll have to install Package Manager first. And then after you do that, you'll be able to install Babel. Babel is a framework that allows you to that in a sense allows you to convert your ES6 code to any ECMAScript code you need. For example, if you want to support older versions of browsers, you'll have to provide them with older version of JavaScript or ECMAScript, and that's why you usually use Babel. But we'll install. Oh, hello, XSky. Oh, IGSky. Not sure about how to read your nickname. But yeah, we usually install Babel. Am I doing something wrong, IGSky? Maybe I'm not streaming at the right place, but nevertheless, I also use Babel, and whatever you like. All right, but specifically I'm using it for my color scheme, and I'm getting Malachi Phoenix out of it. Obviously, I use Git for my versioning. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to create a new GitHub repository, which is going to be called URL Shortener, I suppose. Or we can just call it Shorty. Oh, yeah, I'll call it Shorty. Node.Js app to shorten URL links. And it's going to be public, so that you'll be able to use to have a look at it later on. I'm actually surprised that Shorty hasn't been taken before, but nevertheless. So yeah, those are the tools we are going to use. We're going to put our code on the GitHub. You'll have all the links after today's session, but yeah. Let me know if you'll have any questions in comments. That's essentially what we're going to use. Also, I forgot about the languages, alright? We are going to use NPM and Node.js in particular for this project, so you'll have to install it. In order to install it, you just go to nodejs.org/n, or you can use Node Version Manager, which allows you to install whatever version of Node you need. That's the thing we're going to use for our server. And it's installed by running a small script. And after you restart your terminal, you can just do node or nvm install node. And that's it. Where are you from? I'm from Russia originally, but I live in Canada. So hence the accent, and hence some kind of good English patterns. Just, it looks like Ukrainian Russian person. I am Russian person, yeah. I am. Just moved to Canada around 5 years ago. Привет с Украины. Привет, привет. So, Shorty. Let's get straight to it. After you installed NVM, obviously you'll need to install Mongo. And I will not go too deep into how to install Mongo, but yeah, we'll just go to MongoDB, and I'll copy and paste the link for you there. For giant ideas. Well, I did experience some issues with MongoDB the other day with scaling it up. Жил в Торонто год. Ты в Ванкувере программистом работаешь на какую-то компанию? Нет, я работаю на себя. Работаю на себя. So, that's NVM. У меня куча сервисов. На лайфкодинге я разрабатываю много всего. Например, Bitcoin Lottery недавно закончил. Alright. Then you'll have to use Mongo. For the sake of this tutorial, of course. You don't have to use it in production, though. You have Mongo database, and in a sense, that's all you need to create a server. URL shortener. You have 4 years of experience. Actually more so far. You have around 6 years of experience by now. Should probably change it. But yeah, that's our development stack today. We're going to use Sublime Text 3 as our main IDE with Package Manager, Material Theme, and Babel with Monokai Phoenix color scheme installed. We're going to use NVM to just install Node and Mongo database to install Mongo database. Also, Node comes with Node Package Manager, NPM, which is the place where developers push their libraries, third-party. They push it to GitHub, but that's the collection, the aggregator of all the awesome Node package managers, Node packages, because NPM stands for Node Package Manager. And you can find all kind of stuff here, like localize or any third-party library that's out there for developed for Node.Js should be somewhere here. We are going to use some of them today. Let me get you our GitHub URL here, and I'll try to share this file with you on GitHub Repository as well as the code after today's session, right? Again, guys, if you'll have any questions during the tutorial, feel free to ask them. I'll try to answer them as soon as I get them. All right. So GitHub. GitHub repository is going to be at my GitHub/Shorty. Shorty is the name of the project we're building today. Let me close the Node.js documentation at my live stream and material stream as well, and Babel. Let's close them. Have some tea here, so don't be freaked out. I'm drinking tea. Which is non-alcoholic drink, I suppose. Yeah, so we have the GitHub. Let's start to create our project. Oh, I forgot about the terminal I'm using. I'm actually using iTerm2, which is a great tool. It gives you slightly more flexibility rather than the built-in terminal for your macOS. And yeah, I think it's free, so I'll highly encourage you to install it as well. We are going to use it today. And let me get to the desktop here. CD, change directory, pretty easy. You can also drag and drop files to a terminal if you didn't know on macOS. You know Bitly? Yeah, I know that. And that's pretty much what we're building today, or over the next 3 sessions, including this one. Yeah, we are going to build it. All right. So we are on desktop. I already installed Express.js, but I like the Google Shortener. Yeah, Google Shortener is great as well. I mean, if you got a great domain name like, I don't know, js.com or js.js, maybe. js.js. If you have that kind of domain name, you'd probably be able to put this small application up there. You're going to complete this in 3 sessions. Yep. Oh, what's wrong with that? Because that's a pretty small application. Yeah. was going to do backend today, frontend on the next session, and deployment on the third session. I could probably extend it towards fourth session when I'll put on some more bootstrap, more sophisticated services, but I mean, this is not a huge server, right? That I'm going to write. Anyways, let me get back to code. So, what logic do URL shorteners use to generate the URL? Given that the URLs they generate are short, which logic is used to maintain the uniqueness of the URLs? Well, it depends. It depends. They can use lots of different algorithms. We are going to use one of them today. In a sense, we are just going to search for URLs in our database for the sake of this tutorial, but you may also have algorithms that use timestamp in order to generate URL, so that you will definitely not have any duplicate URLs. But yeah. Also, as I remember, no, I don't think they remove references from older emails. I mean, if we have... Oh, you know what? Maybe we should use emojis in our URL shortener. How about that? Yeah, like URL shortener with emojis. That sounds cool, right? Can we use emojis in our URLs? I mean, something like http google.com/ and emoji here. Oh, yeah, it does work. So whatever, let's use emojis in our URL shortener today. Let me actually change the shortener here to shorty. Let us change the description of this repository then. Where's the description? Can't remember that. Forget about it. We are still going to use emojis today. Fun, right? Okay, so in order to start your first project with Express, with your own project with Express, you need to get Express installed. So that you know, Express is a server-side framework written in Node.Js that allows us to handle connections to our server. In particular, we are going to use it today. It allows us to create RESTful API. Let me add dev stack here, or tech stack maybe. First, we're going to use Node.js. Then we are going to use Express.js. Then we are going to use Mongo database. We aren't going to use Angular, so we are going to use jQuery. We're going to use Bootstrap for our front end, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Express.js is already up there. So in order to install Express, you'll have to use Node Package Manager, install, that's the I there. You can also set the flag G, which means global, and you'll install Express globally, which means that you can then use Express like that, like an app in your terminal. Then you create an Express, setting up the name of our application, which is going to be called Shorty. But even better, today we aren't going to use Jade or Pug, which are the HTML templators. In a sense, it's the way to shorten your HTML code or to import something in it from the outside. So yeah, it's an HTML templator. So you can see that, well, getting started. What about overview? No? Nope. What about the syntax overview? Language reference. So yeah, you can see that you write shorter code and it's converts it to HTML before using it. Sometimes it drastically changes your code, like it makes it very short. But today we are going to use Hogan.js. Hogan.js, which is built by Twitter. And yeah, Hogan.js is just usual HTML with some JavaScript embedded. So we are going to specify that we are going to use Hogan. Otherwise, Express is going to use Pug. Are you self-taught? Yes, I am self-taught. I spent 2 years at university, but it didn't quite work out well for me. I decided that programmers don't need university. So yeah, I specified Hogan as my view engine here, and it's going to use Hogan instead of Pug or Jade. Yeah, just by doing that commands, we created most of the files we need. Easy. Let's create file called info.md. Yeah, info.md, and let's put it inside the shorty there. Also, because I am going to use because I'm going to create both backend and frontend today, I am going to put them in separate folders. I'm not going to do frontend today, I'm going to do it next session, but we'll put everything inside our backend here. And information is going up here. So we have the info.md. MD stands for Markdown. It's the Markdown language that you can use to format your texts. But yeah, let's change directory to shorty, and let's add our GitHub repository there. We'll just add a GitHub remote through HTTPS. I hope you all guys familiar with Git. If not, ask any questions you want. We should do git init first. Then we git remote add origin, and we can add everything. Git commit message initial commit. Git status. Everything is all right. Cool. Now we can open up Sublime Text and open our application. I'll get my terminal over there. And I'll get to the backend, I suppose. Yeah, I'll get to the backend. Also, I'll create a Git Ignore, which is the file that's where you can specify what file types you need to ignore. And in my case, I do want to ignore npm modules, which is going to be at backend node modules, I suppose, and frontend node modules. In the backend, we're going to put our server-side code, and on the front end, we're going to put our client-side code, which is the website that you're going to see. I also have 2 quick snippets that I created. I will cover how to do that. You can Google it on the internet. But the one is called commit, that takes a string on the terminal, which essentially does git add dot and git commit message, whatever you provide here. We are going to add git ignore here. I'm going to do git push. Ooh, no refs in common and non-specified. Do nothing. Specify a branch such as master. Alright, let's do git push origin master. Cool. Let's do git checkout master. Cool. And now we should have our code here. Yep. Also, let's add a readme, just in case. Shorty. Node.js app to shorten your links with emoji. Let's put an emoji here. And fire here. Shorty. Commit new file. Cool. With emoji. Save. Is there a reason you choose Node.js? Well, it depends, you know. I tried Python, Django, I tried a couple of other frameworks like Ruby on Rails. They didn't quite work out well for me. So I decided to stick to Node.js. And it's worked for me, so I still do Node.js most of the time. But yeah, we got Shorty. Let's pull our changes from the GitHub repository, otherwise we will have commits. Git branch. Let's do upstream here to origin master. And we can now do git pull. Cool. So we have readme out there. And info.md. I'll probably format it later on. But today we are going to look into our Express repository. We have views which are error Hogan.js and index Hogan.js. Welcome to title. If you run nodemon, and by the way, that's another info.md, that's another tech stack. Actually, it's an environment. Let me get you a nodemon link. What it does, it allows us to run Node.js application. No, we need to use cd to backend. It allows us to run Node.js application, and it observes changes in files as soon as you change. As soon as you change the files, it restarts the server. Our application is now crashed because we didn't install our Node package manager, our packages for Node. We have a package.json in every single Node.js app that specifies some information for it and scripts where to start Node, for example. If you do npm run start or npm on Node, npm run start, you'll execute these commands, as well as it gives us dependencies. And in our case, we are going to get rid of some of the dependencies because we are not going to use them on our backend. For example, favicon, we don't need it. That's the icon that is going to appear beside the website URL. Morgan is the logger that, as I recall, it's logs all the requests to our terminal. Hogan.js is the HTML templater that gets the Hogan format HTML with mustache, that's how we call it, mustaches, and converts it to plain HTML. Express is the framework we use to handle RESTful API or RESTful requests. Debug is the thing that allows us to write, as I remember. No, we're not going to use debug today, so we'll not cover it. Cookie parser, also we're not going to use it today, because we aren't going to parse any cookies from our RESTful API, but body parser is the thing that allows us to convert the request's body, the RESTful API request body, towards understandable format that we can use. And that's the whole stack of dependencies today. Probably we're going to add some more later on, but for now, that should be good. In order to install all of those dependencies, we'll have to run npm I command. I stands for install. Again, you obtain npm by installing Node with Node version manager, which is nvm. And look at that, it installed all of our dependencies in Node modules. And fortunately, in our Git Ignore, we ignored node modules of both parts of our project. Why did we do that? Because every single time you clone a repository, you'd better reinstall all of your dependencies so that you have the latest version of those dependencies. So now if I do git status, it will not track node modules because I specified in Git Ignore not to track it. Perfect time to use my commit and push command. It's almost like commit, but it does git push in the end. Commit and push. Let's say I clean package JSON. As you can see, it adds all the files in my repository, uncommitted files, to track on Git, then commits them and push them. Easy. So now, when I installed my dependencies, I can run nodemon, and my application crashed because I couldn't find the module serve fav icon. We'll get to that later. Let's try to see how Node.js app works. Well, we have package.json, and as I already mentioned, script starts our Node application, and that's what nodemon is looking for when it starts the application. Starts node dot at the beginning of your path means this folder /bin/www. So let's open this file up /www. What does it look like? And in a sense, it's just a simple HTTP server, nothing more. Let's go over this file really quick, and I'm going to use ECMAScript 6 most of the time today, so I'll get rid of var. Var is bad. Instead, we are going to use const probably. Yep. So we have const app. App is our application that exists in app.js. Double dot means the previous directory. And app.js is right there. We removed debug, so we are not going to use debug today, and we required HTTP. Require is the way to obtain code from other files. So in a sense, require /app means that we need to obtain whatever is returned in the end of our app.js. One directory app. HTTP allows us to require, if we require HTTP, it allows us to require system module. Just remember that if you specify the path to the module, to the file, it's going to require that file. If you specify just the name of the module that you installed, and HTTP comes with the Express, as I remember, or with Node.js itself. I'm pretty sure it's shipped with Node.js. If you require the module that is shipped with the system, or if it's like an npm, you don't specify the path. Instead, you just specify the name. Instead of, trying to get the port from our environment, instead we'll just hardcode the port. Should be good. Yeah. We'll talk about what's up. We'll talk about what is this app dependency slightly later, like in 2 minutes or so. But for now, let's concentrate on our HTTP server. So we got our HTTP dependency, which is used to create a server, HTTP, and we provide the server our app.js. So HTTP server is the guy who is going to handle requests and responses to our RESTful API. And by the way, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with what is RESTful API, right? If you don't know what is RESTful API, stop right now, go on the internet, Google about RESTful API, and then come back. But so far, we are going to create our HTTP server and make it listen on a particular port, which means that as soon as we do nodemon, or as soon as we launch our Node application, if we do any requests to, for example, in this case, localhost at port 3000, we are going to get into our application. The next one is called, the design pattern, as I remember, it's called emitter or observing. It doesn't quite matter. The thing is, here you specify server.on, you specify what function should be called on each event, and you specify which event should be called. on which event that function should be called. So in our case, we have an onError function, which is called every single time when server fails at some point. We are going to get rid of this function, so right now you shouldn't do that in production, but we'll get rid of it, because I am pretty confident that my server is going to boot up today. And we'll get rid of error on error statement, because there is no on error function that is going to be called when we receive error event. However, as soon as our server is set up, it's going to send a listening event. And as you can see, we set it up the way that it's going to call on listening function. Well, you know what? I'm actually not using normalize port. We use it to get the port out of the environment variable and normalize it to a string of whatever. And instead of doing this stuff when I check for the port or piping, I'll just do console.info. That's kind of an alternative to console.log. Console.log is generally not a good idea to use in your production code, but you can use console.info, well, anywhere. Not that often though. I use it probably only in this place in my production code. But let's just say that our server is up and running. And let's hardcode on port 3000. Also, I would highly encourage you to use single quotation marks. I don't know, it's just looks cleaner, probably. But yeah, other than that, as soon as we launch our HTTP server with our app.js as a dependency, we are going to console.info, server is up and running on port 3000. We'll also literally just hardcode the port. I don't want to mess with it. So yeah, and that's pretty much it for our first file, www. That's the file that is going to be executed as soon as we launch our Node application, because it's written in package.json. So what happens next? Well, then we are going to go to app.js file, and that's the file that is passed as an argument to create a server, HTTP server. So let's have a look at what happens at app.js. Well, a whole bunch of stuff happens there, believe me. Yeah, app.js is actual logic of our web server. And let's get rid of some stuff here. For example, we aren't using favicon anymore. We aren't using cookie parser anymore. The things we are using are Express, which is our framework to handle requests and send responses through RESTful API. Path, that's the thing that allows us to create file paths. Logger, that's the thing that allows us to log all the requests to file and to the console. And body parser, the thing that allows us to parse the body of every request. Then, after we get all the dependencies installed or requires, we create our Express application. And that's the point where things get interesting. This is the thing that is going to be exported at the very end of the file, which means that that is exactly the thing that is going to create server. Alright, which means that Express is going to be our actual app. Instead of using var, let's use const. Then we set up the view engine, which is Hogan in our case. That's the thing that is going to convert all the Hogan.js files to HTML. And we just require all the views from the views folder, which has error Hogan.js and index Hogan.js. And from the error Hogan.js, let's remove the error stack trace. We don't need it anymore. Also, in our Hogan error.js, let's, instead of using error.status, let's use just status in this case. Then we're getting rid of app icon, Then we say that Morgan should be instantiated with the variable def, and we use it as a middleware in our in our Express application. What is middleware? Express handles requests and responses. The thing is, there is something that happens in between of the request and response. And Express gives us the concept of middleware, which is a sequence of actions that happen between request and response. For every single request, you'll go through a sequence of middlewares, functions, ran one after another, and then you send the response. That is it. And you specify the middlewares, usage of middlewares by doing app.use. So in our case, our Express is going to use logger, which is Morgan, first thing after, after every request and before every response, which will probably log our requests. Then we'll use body parser.json, which is going to parse our arguments from the request. Then it's going to use body parser URL encoded, which is going to parse URL encoded arguments from our request. We are going to get rid of cookie parser. We're not using it. Then it's going to set the static root for whatever static we have here in public. And you know what? I think we can get rid of it. No modules, roots. Yeah, just realized that we don't need two applications here. We can just use frontend. Whatever. Let's create two applications today, both backend and frontend, so that we can run backend somewhere and from frontend somewhere else. Right? Nah, that sounds stupid. You know what? We'll just do one app today. Let's get everything back on here. We have our fav icon. We are going to use it. However, we aren't going to use debugger, and there is no debugger here, which is great. We'll get rid of serve fav icon for now, because we are going to serve fav icons separately in a different way. But so that you know, we didn't cause much issues here. You can just run npm install save cookie parser, which will install the npm module cookie parsers, the one we got out of our package.json, and it's going to appear at package.json. What else did we take out? We have public, which is great. Error index. Yeah, sounds just right. Can we run node mode now, please? Serve fav icon. We need to get rid of that. We aren't using it. Where do we use it? In module.js. Where do we use our serve fav icon? Oh, all right. So port isn't defined. Server.listen. Well, probably we'll have to keep a reference to our port. Const port. To use it in two places, and when we need to edit it, we'll edit it in one place. So we got our port. We can restart nodemon. Looks like we are already using. Oh no, we cannot use port 300 because it's the system required one. So we'll use port 3000, and it looks like server is up and running. And now we can access our localhost at port 3000. Not data. That's going to be not found. 3000, which is Express. Welcome to Express, the usual template page, the index page that's going to be served at the index root. All right. So instead of having backend and frontend, we are going to just have the whole app written here. Let's get rid of backend and frontend. Let's get rid of app.js, and that's it. All right. But today we are going to only do the backend. And as you can see, when I opened my app on the web browser, I have to cd back to the previous folder because that's where our app stays now. Oh, it's in trash. Okay, it shouldn't be in trash. It should be in shorty. Cool. So now if I run my app, you'll see that I received 2 calls to my server. First one is getting the main root of my app, which is 3000 / and the second one is getting style sheets for this page. And we're going to talk about style sheets in the second session. Today we are just going to do the backend. So we have views, we set them up, we have cookie parser now, just in case if we serve cookies, and that's the part of the front end. Then we have express.static, which is, well, public. It exposes public folder, so that we can access any of those files. Style sheets, style.css, any of those files through the URL. And yeah, so let's get going in our app.js. After that, we set up the mechanism which is called routes. This routing mechanism, it kind of leads all the requests to specific files. In our case, we have users root, which is situated in a separate file. Let's open routes. Users, that's the file. To the right, you can see the file that gets required in app.js. And looks like we pass it to our router to use when somebody tries to hit at /users root. So if we do /users here, we are going to get to router.get. Respond with the resource, and that's exactly what's that. We use just routes here, and that's the index file of routes folder. We just renders the index page, almost like index.html, but it renders it through index.js, which is which is Hogan.js. And yeah, that's how you redirect the requests from your main URL to separate files. That's it. Yeah, then we're catching 404. So because app.use is the middleware, it means that Express, when it receives a request, it will go over all the middlewares from top to bottom until it hits the middleware that sends a response to whoever requested data. And after Express goes through all the available routes, it will eventually hit the error handler here, which is just creating a new error not found with status 404 and passing it through the next function, and that's the function that we use as a dependency, as an argument in all of our routes. next basically means continue execution. And in our case, we pass an error to the next here. Also, we'll get rid of the development error handler. I don't feel like I need it today. We'll just do production error handler right away. If something comes up, we'll see it in our terminal. So if you will ever execute next with an argument, like here, probably it will get to your middleware that handles the requests. And because it's a website, a backend API, yeah, just a website, we are going to render the error. That's it. And that's how you use Hogan.js to show data, but we'll cover it in the second session. Today we're covering only backend. So, yep, we can render error, which happens if we, for example, hit a page that doesn't exist. It just gives us not found with message of error. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the part of app.js. So I hope I explained app.js to you. Then we start working with routes, with different routes. And let's lay out our RESTful API that we're going to use here. First of all, we'll need to have a database, some kind of a database, which will probably have links stored in it. Each short link having an actual link where it should point to. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to keep track of all the shortened links we have, which is where MongoDB comes in handy. And in order to explore Mongo database, I use MongoChef. Let me show you MongoChef probably. But I'll also add it to, I think it's called Mongo 3T now. They just renamed it. I think it's free for non-commercial licenses, but I'm not sure about it. Yeah, it's called studio3t.com and I cannot access it for some reason. Weird. Guys, can't you fix it? Whatever. Hope my internet is not down. It's not down. So I'll just say MongoChef or Studio 3T whatever. Or MongoChef. That's the thing that allows you to examine your Mongo databases. Yeah, to examine your Mongo databases on the fly. Alright. So we have a Mongo database here laid out. Let me open it up. Have plenty of different routes here that can use for Mongo database, plenty of URLs because I have plenty of projects. But today we're just going to use the localhost one. So in my MongoChef, I'll just connect to localhost Mongo database. Stays at 127.0.0.1. Oh, look at that! My Mongo database isn't running. I'll run it through using sudo mongot to run my Mongo database on sudo user. So now, when my Mongo is running, and Mongo should be running mongot, and we'll cover it in third session, how to deploy applications so that it restarts when it launches and so that it restarts on reboot of your Ubuntu server in the third session, but yeah, we'll cover it in the third session. So far, you should just know that your Mongo should be running in order for you to write to it and read from it, from the database. All right. Well, I feel like I need some interface to use my Mongo database. So I'll probably have to consider using a third-party library, ORM, that is going to connect to Mongo. And I tend to use, I'm installing a new package, saving it to package.json. I tend to use Mongoose for that. That's Node package that allows us to write and read to and from Mongo database. As easy as that. That's it. And let's create a new folder called models. And that's the place where we are going to keep all of our data models for MongoDB that explain how to store data in Mongo database. So it basically explains what objects we're going to store there with what properties. Okay. Good. After we installed our Mongoose module, let's get to Mongoose website to see how it works. Oh, it's called ODM now. Cool. So we instantiate the Mongoose, we connect the Mongoose, and we can create Mongoose models. I'll use another project of mine as a reference here. I'll use, what should I use? I'll use controller backend project as a reference to see how, how models are written and how to boot up the Mongoose. All right. So we have our app.js, and let's create the first model for our Mongoose. That's going to be called URL. I don't want to call it URL, because URL is one of the reserved words in Node. So let's call it address. Why not? Well, let's give it .js extension. So .js, not sj. Rename. .js. Save it, and I'll just look at my schema. That's how Mongoose schemas look like, and I'll rename it from the invite schema to address, because that's the unique address we're going to use. Address schema. Well, all the Mongoose objects have ID built in. Let me open the Mongo Chef. Every single Mongoose object, Mongo object, has an ID assigned to it, which looks slightly like that. And that's it. That's all it has initially. If you add an option timestamps true, it will also add two more variables to your object, created at and changed at, as I remember, which are of type date. But so far, we need only two properties of our address schema, address object that is going to be stored in database. First one being URL, being original URL, which is going to be a string. And I love to set specifically state all the options at every single path at my schemas. So in our case, original URL is going to be of type string and required true. We cannot create an address object without original URL. And let's give it short URL property as well, which is going to be type string and required true. Just like that. So we can now store objects at our database, but not so fast, because we still need to, we just specified the type of object we can store in Mongoose, in Mongo database through Mongoose. We need to use Mongoose now. So what we'll do, because we installed Mongoose's dependency in our project, we can now use it in app.js. We'll close index. And let's boot the Mongoose up. We do it by requiring Mongoose, and then we need to connect it like that. We need to connect it to our database, and our database URL, that's how it connects. I mean, actually it connects through URI, but we'll call it URL anyways. So we need to specify the address for Mongoose, where our Mongo database is situated. You can also specify remote URL or local URL, but it should always start with MongoDB, as I remember. Yeah, I think it's MongoDB, Mongo database, localhost. And let's have a look at where our MongoDB is looking for connections. And so it looks for connections at port 27017, which is the default one. And we need to specify the database name. And in our service here, in the list of databases, they're going to be Shorty afterwards. It will not appear there until we write the very first record there. But yeah, so let's do it. Also, Mongoose from latest releases asks us to specify the promise library for the Mongoose. And yeah, we just specify the global.promise, which is the promise library that is used globally. Yep, and then what we do here, we require every single file from the models file, which is just, looping through all the files in folder models and requiring all of them. That's all we do here. Cool, so now Mongoose is set up and running, which means that Mongoose should be able to connect to our database. If we run our application, and look at that, our application crashed because we didn't require the module that we're using here, FS. FS stands for file system, and that's the system framework of Node.Js to connect to the file system, to read from files, or to get all the file names from a folder. And as you can see, server is up and running on port 3000, which means that Mongoose successfully connected to the database. If we misspelled something here, like maybe localhost.com, like that, and let's get rid of the port number, our Mongoose would give us an error here, because it would try to connect to localhost.com/shorty, and it would fail. Well, at some point it would fail. I don't want to wait for timeout, so I'll just get everything back here. So now if I save it, Node.Mon restarts my application, and we're ready to go. Alright. So let's think about how we're going to structure this thing. We are going to have one post request. You should be familiar with the RESTful API for this course. We will have we'll probably have one root called URLs, and let's actually two roots. First one being the index root, and the second one being URLs. Yeah, like that. Roots. We have the index roots, and instead of doing roots, let's call it index, because I like to call the things by their names. And we'll have root called URLs instead of users. We don't want to have users root. So let's rename users to urls.js. And for now, it will respond with resource. And here, it will mean that all the requests going through /urls will always get to update URLs. And let's get to our URLs then. Let's forget about app.js for now. Obviously we'll need to change the var to const, because that's the requirement of ECMAScript, and function, anonymous function declaration to the arrow function. And now if we'll go to our localhost at port 3000/urls, we are going to get the message respond with resource, which we sent here to our response. Let's investigate how does a root look like. Well, root has the URL where it goes to, and a function that takes 3 arguments: request, response, and next. And well, it probably shouldn't return anything, but here's what it does. It can either send something to response. This will send it to whoever requested this request, or you can just do next. Let's try to do next. Let's try to do next without arguments. It will just continue going through the middlewares. Let's actually do next. I'd like to see it. Didn't wait long enough. Yeah, it goes to not found, because afterwards, after we run next, it went to the error handler right away, because that's the very next thing, the very next middleware the express hits. Alright, so we've already set up our environment. We've already set up our Mongo database. Let's now do stuff, right? So what I usually do, I create a folder called helpers, which is where I keep all of my files that keep functions that I don't want to make global or something. And we're going to have a file called db.js, which stands for database.js. That is going to handle all the requests to database, alright? I mean, all of them. And by doing this, we'll require Mongoose. Then, well, we'll need to require all the... Let me have a look at our DB here. Yeah, we'll need to require all the schemas. Let me actually copy and paste it from the database here to the database that we have in our project. Well, we'll probably not need most of those dependencies, but we are going to import the model called address that we created to the left, and we'll create exports module, because that's why we need to create helpers to encapsulate functions like function find address for URL probably. So we'll give it long URL, and it will give us address if it finds one from the database, and we can get that function to exports. And now whoever will require db.js will get this object as the required one, which will have find address function in it. Cool, right? Okay. So we get user. Instead of just getting URLs, let's do post URLs. You know, instead of URLs, let's actually call it address. rename. Because, like, why not, right? And in app.js now we need to rename it. URLs to address. Now everything should work. And if we go to address, we'll have infinite loading because we didn't respond with anything. All right, so what do we do on post when we want to post? We will... What do we need to do there? We will post short long URL through body, and we'll do to get the... And by the way, so that you know, we are already building the RESTful API, the very first method. Post that allows us to create new short URL. Const this request will have a couple of required arguments. Well, actually only one, which is going to be const long URL request.body, because it's going to be in body of the request, long URL, and let's call it long URL like that. So now when let's console log long URL, and let's do response send success. Okay, actually true. And finish the response. Finish the request by sending the response. And here's how we use it. In Postman, oh, that's another thing that I'm using here, right? So I need to add it to my info.md. Here. Postman. How to get it? Let's call it Postman REST clients. Get postman.com. It's pretty fancy tool. And inside our Postman, we can now do requests, and we are going to execute this request in particular that we just wrote. It's going to be a post type request because we specified post here instead of get or delete or put, whatever. And we're going to get to http post / localhost 3000, because this is the post 3000 address. Yep, and in our app.js we specify the address, getting into our address. Yay. Cool. And now if we post something, it shouldn't work. I mean, it will work, but long URL is going to be null. Yeah, look at that. It's undefined. It's ugly as hell. PO is undefined because it's going to be response sent. Sent. And now we have success true. So you can see that Postman is the way to simulate RESTful requests. And you use it to simulate the request to address of type post. And as soon as we send the response from our root, it will get to our Postman as a response. So now let's specify a long URL. You know what? I think that this root shouldn't work without having long URL. So if there is no long URL, we should probably do response send success false. We should probably add errors here, but I will not go too deep into it. You can use validation for Express or whatever framework you want. So what we'll do here, instead of just returning success true for not having the long URL, we'll return success false now. So we need to have a way to specify our long URL, and we do it through body of our request. Long URL. And it's going to be a JSON. It's going to be, let's say, http://google.com. Let's shorten that out, right? When we send it, you'll get success true. Funks Games, hello, how are you doing today? I'm doing some premium tutorials here, right? Let me know if you'll have any questions about this Node.js app. But yeah, so now, as you can see, we received success true because we actually did specify the long URL, and we even logged it in our console here. Oh, sorry. So let's now somehow shorten that URL. Well, we need to do a couple of things here. First of all, we need to generate emoji URL for that. Secondly, we need to check if that URL isn't already in the database. If so, we'll regenerate it and do it again. Then after we succeeded, we need to save that URL to the database. And yeah, that's probably it. We'll save that URL to the database. For later use. So how to do that? Well, we need to do it on the line 11 here. Check if URL is already in the database. If so, just return it. Then we need to check it. Then we need to generate it. If it's not already in the database, we need to check if it's not in the database anymore. And not anymore. If it's still not in database, the generated URL, and then add it here. Yeah, something like that. So let's do it. db.js, address.js. Let's create a new helper. New file. Let's call it URL. Let's call it just shorten.js. And that is going to be the guy that has one function called shorten that takes URL in it. And we have exports, module.exports equals to that only function, shorten. Because that's all we need, right? And let's import it in our address route. Const shorten equals to require. Also, router is going to give us error if we'll use ESLinter, because require should have at least one line break after it. All the requires, the block of requires. And require will specify address.js is in roots. So we need to go one folder up, then go to helpers, and then go to shorten.js. And that's how we do it. Now we go to the shorten file, which is the one you can see to the left. Shorten URL. And guess what? It is going to return us a promise. I will not go too deep into promises today. You'll definitely need to Google how they work later on your own. If you don't know how promises work yet, stop this tutorial, pause it, go to the Google, and Google it. how promises work. As soon as you understand how promises work, come back to this tutorial. We'll create a new promise. Shorten URL. That's going to just return a shortened URL. And that's the thing we're going to do here. We have shorten URL, and here we'll shorten. We'll use shorten dot shorten. That is going to be our long URL. And then when we get a result URL, we are going to send it. As easy as that. But if something happens in between, we'll catch an error and we'll just forward it to our error handler, which is the error handler in our app.js. Here, that one. So this error will go into app.use. Unexpected token. I misspelled the arrow here, sorry. And yeah, so let's say our shortened URL always returns us the short URL, right? It always returns us HTTP localhost. Let's add an emoji here. That one. Probably just the fire one. Like that. So let's try the shortened URL. Here. Headers, body, success, address. We post it. We get the body of google.com long URL. Let's try to send it, and we get result URL is not defined. Result URL. And we get our localhost / fire. So we see that our promise, well, kind of works. Shorten does resolve something. But here we actually need to resolve a working URL that is unique in our database. So let's do that. Well, first, we'll probably need to dependencies. Well, first, we'll probably need to have a DB reference here, which is the DB manager that we have. Actually, we have it in the same folder as the shorten, right? So here, DB. Now we're working with the db.js. We'll have a find address method. So again, shorten the URL. How do we shorten it? First, we need to look for it. If there is already such address. If so, we will just return the short URL for that. What we'll do here, we'll try to look for address first. And that's how we do it. We do db dot find address URL. That's the address we are looking for. Then we have the URL that might be there. Let's actually shorten address. Let's call it address here. Find address, address. Then we got the DB address that we found. We either find it or not. So if we find it, DB address, then here we will just return DB address dot long dot short URL, because that's what we need, right? we need short URL. And because this promise returns us short URL, we are able to use it in the next then block. And here we'll already have short URL that we are going to resolve. Yeah, like that. Also, if we catch an error, you have to forward it to reject, because it doesn't quite work if we just return db.find address here for some reason. So we have two functions, resolve and reject our promise. Resolve, when called, will trigger then at shorten, whereas reject will trigger catch at shorten. Reject will trigger the error handler. Then, which is resolve, will trigger response.send result URL. And the first thing we do in shorten, we try to find the address that's already in our database. Here, find address. And if it's in there, which is the one that's returned, we return the short URL that already exists there in our database. If we already shortened the URL, no need to shorten it again, right? And how do you find address? Well, relatively simple. You do address.find1. You can find it all in Mongoose documentation, find one. And here we are providing original URL. So we look up for original URL address. And we will just return this, because this is already a promise. And by doing find address, it will return us the promise, where we can use .then and .catch. Again, the last .then block will resolve our short URL, which we'll get in here. So yeah, we can find address. But what happens if address is not yet there, right? Well, we'll need to generate one. For that sake, I would create a new helper called generator.js. Sorry, a new file called generator.js, which is also going to have exports. Module.exports equals to, and inside exports, we are going to have only one function called generate. Well, actually, you know what? We'll have that function here right away, straight in our exports. This is going to be the function that we return. That probably takes nothing. It just needs to generate random emojis. Let's have a look if we have random generator at Node.js. Node/emoji. Interesting. To install Node emoji, you need Node.js and npm. Emoji come from JS emoji. Returns a random emoji plus key. Search coffee, returns an array of object, emojify, all emoji, get. That's exactly the thing we're looking for. So let's install Node emoji to our module here, to our npm, because we do need random emojis, right? Right. So as soon as we installed it, we can use it. So it's required in our exports, and that's how easy it is to install new modules to your node and how easy it is to use them. Exports. Let's think about how long should our URL be. How many emojis are out there? I'm pretty sure more than 100, which means that we have 100 emojis, and let's say we have 5. let's say we have 5 emojis and we need to get it to the hundredth power. I forgot how to do this. Long time no university. So it's 5 emojis in the power of 100. Thought it was like that. But yeah, whatever. It's a long number of sequences. So what we'll do here, we'll generate 5 emojis. And we'll just return a function consisting of 5 different emojis. Let's create another function here. Let's call it R, stands for random. And that random function is going to just return us a random emoji, which is emoji.random. And then here we're going to have 5 emojis, which will look like that. We have a string prototype and we use the same function 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Okay, so now we have a generator here. So we can generate our emoji, and we need to do const generator. We need to require the dependency here as well. Alright, so if we didn't find the address, we need to generate a new address for it. Let's actually have a base URL here. You know what, generator, let's actually generate the address inside the generator itself. We'll also add dependencies here. Dependencies keyword. And let's create a const called base URL, which is going to be HTTP, in our case localhost, at port 3000. And that is the URL we are going to use as the base of our generator. Oops, sorry. Like that. Cool. So now, generator will generate us a random URL. Yeah. It's my girlfriend texting me. Sorry, guys. Have to turn on the do not disturb button here, right? Okay. So we need to generate our new address. So let's do it. Const generate new generated address. And that's going to just use generator. Like that. Well, as soon as let's assume that we don't have duplicates. So we'll just resolve. We'll actually return generated address. Let's just return it for now. Let's not save it to the database just yet. So now if we run our node one, we should be able to get a random address every single time. Send. Ooh. You see we have lots of objects, because objects are the things that are going to be returned. Here we need to get that object going. And yes, you can see that we have random emojis here. Cool. Can I put it in my... Yeah, random emojis. 5 random emojis. Just like that. So we created a random address sequence. Right here, right now. Cool. So let's now save it. Why not? Why not saving it? Right? So how to save it? First, we need to figure out. Yeah, let's assume that we never have duplicates, right? Let's assume that. Let's assume that every single time there is unduplicated sequence of emojis. And here we have short URL with catch reject. We'll need to save this generated address to the database, and we'll do it. We'll do function create save address, which is going to get an address, and do const new address. We are creating an object of type address with address object, and we return new address dot save. So we are saving this address to the database. That's how easy it is to use Mongoose to create new objects to a database. And here we will use that method that we're going to put the public interface of our DB. And here, as soon as we generate the address, we are going to do db dot save address, where we need to provide the address that we're going to save, and we need to use original URL and short URL syntax, where our original URL is going to be address at the very top, the one that we get here to shorten, and our short URL is going to be the generated address, the one that we just generated. And as soon as we save our address, which is the then definition here, we'll need to return our promise. Then, after that, we'll have to probably resolve it. Then we have db address. We are using the new variable name in order not to get lost between all those addresses. We actually have db address, right? Then let's call it new db address. Let's just call it new address. Then we will return new address dot short URL. So yeah, that's how we did it. So now, as soon as we save the long URL, shortened URL to our database, we will always get the same short URL for the same long URL. Let's try it. So our google.com is shortened to this URL, and if we send this request again, we'll get exactly the same URL every single time. Yeah, just like that. If we do google.ca now, we'll get another random emoji. It looks like Postman doesn't support it. However, it does support. It is supported in Safari. Oh, in Chrome. Yeah. So just like that, guys, we got the long URL. So we just developed one RESTful API method to generate random URLs and save them to database. We'll probably need another URL here, another root, which is going to be get, because we need to be able to get long URL by short URL. So get requests don't have bodies, they have queries. And this is the directly opposite situation here. We have short URL, and we need to get long URLs here. Get a short URL. Here we'll, instead of doing shorten URL, we are going to get a DB here, require helpers DB, which is our database, and our DB is going to have another method. We have find address by the original URL. We'll also have function finds long address, which is going to send short address there. Find long address. Which is going to search through by short URLs. And here we're going to do short here. Yeah. And address in our models has short URL property. Yes, just like that. So we are able to find long address by having short address. And here we'll try to find long address by getting short URL in it, and we'll just return the result URL here. So now, if we create an address for example, for one of my projects, which is https controller.co send, we are going to get a unique address, emoji address here. Let's try to get it inside. It works. And now let's execute this GET request at the address and query is going to have short URL equals to localhost. Short and find long address is not a function. Oh, we use shortened, whereas we should have used db. Yeah, and look at that. We have the original URL and short URL. Actually, let's just return the original URL. So here now, we'll get the original URL. Just like that. Cool. Yeah. Huh. What else can we do today in the next 8 minutes? Let's make it work, right? Let's make our URLs work. So we have shortened URL now. And after I shorten my URL, I want to be able to go to that kind of URL, right? Otherwise, what's the point? I want to be able to go there. And I want to be able to go there and redirect myself to controller.co in this case. So let's try it. Let's try it. We have addresses and we have index. Well, every single time we're trying to get short URL, get to long URL, we'll go through this route as well. And let's try to get Node.Js, get full URL from request. Let's try to get it. How to get the full URL in Express? Probably that's the way to get it. Full URL. Here, you'll get it. Full URL. And by the way, I'm going to use some fancy magic with prototype strings here, because I don't like concatenation anymore. Hosts. And then requests original URL. Just like that. So we have full URL. Here we'll probably get DB as well. Require. It's on index.js in roots, so we'll get out of it. Go to helpers and go to DB manager. And here we'll try to find it. db.find long address by using the short address, which is our full URL. And then if we find long address, we'll need to somehow redirect there. But if there is no long address, well, we'll have to throw some kind of an error. I will just do next, whatever, and we'll return. Else, we'll also do catch. Catch, error, next, error. Just like that. And if we do find the long version of address, we'll need to redirect there. Express, redirect to URL. Just like that. Right hat, 301. As easy as that. So we take the response, you write a header, that's going to be a 301, which is the code of permanent redirect, with location being wow, that's a long way. But location will just be long dot models address original URL. Just like that. So now we'll be actually able to get to this URL, to get to my controller.co. Sorry. Not found. Ha! Interesting. So why isn't it found? Let's console log full URL. Let's see why wasn't it found. Not found. Oh. We didn't even log it. Because there was no way to get it, right? Huh. Well, probably we should just have ID here, and we could do http / localhost 3000, which is the base URL plus ID. I'll probably do that. Const ID equals to request query dot ID. Let's try that. Ooh. Undefined. Interesting. Wait a minute, how do we get ID then? Come on. Express router, good idea. Like that. Always forget how to do that. Params. So that. Can't set headers after they are sent. Huh. Oh yeah, it does. The full request. Response.end. Next. Return. Response right hand. Response here. Like that. Yeah, look at that. It worked. It redirected me. Cool. You can actually get rid of this console log. Let's try to boost in some fancy stuff here. Original URL of null. Obviously, because there is no long. And we just do next and return. So we halt the execution of this function, but for some reason, console.log long. Long is null. So if it is null, we go to next and return. How come does it go to res right hand? Console.com, console.log, 1, 2, 3. Let's figure it out. And that's going to be the wrap up of today's tutorial. No, it doesn't go there. It just says cannot read property original URL of something. Find long address. Yeah, whatever. Cannot find the original URL. We'll should debug it. We shall debug it later. Let's try full URL here. Ooh. Full URL doesn't even get in there. Interesting. Oh, short URL, sorry. Address, we get it for 1, 2, 3, 4. Not found. Cool. What about emoji here? Not found. Cool, it works. Okay, it works. It's 404. Let's try to post the localhost, our emoji. Let's put it instead of our emoji here. Why is it not found? Come on. Should be fine. Let's copy the whole URL. Maybe I'm missing something. Yeah, it redirects us. So yeah, we just finished our first part of this tutorial to create emoji redirect URLs. Thank you a lot for watching it, guys. I really appreciate you watching this tutorial, and yeah, let's do a 10 minutes questions and answers section. If you have any questions about the code I wrote today. While we're doing it, I'll try to validate the URL. Oh, valid URL. I mean, it wasn't that hard, right? Was it? Shouldn't be that hard. npm install valid URL. It was good, thanks. You're very welcome. Let's install the validator so that nothing fancy gets into our is HTTP URI. Is the value well formed URI? We'll check for HTTP URI and HTTPS URIs. Actually, you know what? I'll just check if it's URI or not. Let's check that as soon as we create our. So when we post a URI, let's check if it's valid. If not long URL or and actually. And if it's or not valid URL is URI long URL. So just like that, we limited the usage of our application so that only URLs can be shortened with it, not some random text. Yeah. What else? Here we can also do that. Get find long address. Get long URL by short URL. We should have probably used. No, we shouldn't use address here. But other than that, could also put that here. Probably an overkill. So we have an index, get long URL by short URL. We probably don't need this route anymore at all. Yeah, just like that. So we have post address, which allows us to post new long URL to generate short URL for it. And you know what? I feel like doing success through here. And result URL as a result. That might be better, because we don't want to send plain text, we want to send JSON there. Yeah, let's try to shorten a couple more links to see if it actually works. Let's try to shorten, I don't know, facebook.com. Send it. Just shortened the facebook.com. Cool stuff. Let's see if it works. And yeah, it worked. It redirected us to Facebook. Cool. So what's next? Let's send some funky. Oh, look at that. It's valid URI for some reason. Whatever. Let's put some more commas. Alright, it works apparently. Let's just send facebook.com. That should return us false finally. Yes. So guys, that's all for the tutorial today. We just created Emoji URL shortener app. Simple one in 2 hours. The next day, on Thursday, actually on Wednesday, we are going to create frontend for this, and on Friday we're going to deploy it. Thank you a lot, guys. I'll highly appreciate following, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye. And as usual, guys, stay awesome, bros.